And by way of background, in October of this year, there was a national public opinion survey done, in which 3/4 of Canadians, 3 out of 4, said they were harmed by the health protection measures adopted to deal with the COVID-19. These are not harms from COVID-19, which have been well documented and which were substantial, but these were harms as a result of the health protection measures adopted. And these fell into 4 categories: health harms, harms due to the lengthening of the waiting lines, the inaccessibility of the Canadian healthcare system, negative consequences affected with some of the vaccines. They included harms to rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, many of which are being litigated in the lower courts. They included social harms as a result of social distancing and social isolation, particularly those experienced by older people and by children as a result of the school lockdowns. And they included economic harms. In fact, when the pollsters asked which of these categories of harms did people feel affected the largest number of Canadians, in other words, affected the country as a whole, as distinct from affecting them personally or their family, the economic harms came up at the top of the list. So at this inquiry, what we're looking for is witnesses to testify as to the impacts of these measures on their personal and family lives, personal stories. But we're also looking for expert testimony, particularly from experts whose alternative medical narratives or alternative scientific narratives were ignored or even censored during the time of the pandemic. And as I stressed at the beginning, and I've stressed each time, at the end of the day, what the commissioners will be looking for from these witnesses is not just the stories, not just the negatives, and not just the alternative narratives, but recommendations as to what could have been done differently so that those harms were either avoided or at least mitigated. And proposals for submissions. If people are watching or learning of this today and wish to testify at these hearings, either as to personal stories or as expert witnesses, the place to go to is nationalcitizensinquiry.ca/hearings, nationalcitizensinquiry.ca/hearings, and make your proposal for a submission there. Richard, you want to elaborate on that a little bit, and then I'll go. Yes, thank you, Richard. All of these hearings will be bilingual, have a bilingual capacity, but the first 2 will be in, the first one will be in Moncton, and the second one will be in Montreal. So it's very important that particularly folks from those areas make their appeal to provide submissions for those inquiries in either French or English. Just one example, and there are actually hundreds of these, of the type of story that we expect to hear because they are being told elsewhere. This is just a sample from Brian and Kelly, who were the owners of a fitness center in the GTA. In fact, they were just opening their second location when the COVID pandemic hit. The Ontario government locked them down for, initially they were told this would be just for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, but that turned into virtually a 2-year lockdown of their business. They tried to adjust by getting into online training and things of that type, but the government then came out with an order that businesses such as theirs were to not operate above 30% capacity, which meant that they were virtually, it was virtually impossible to achieve the revenue required to sustain the business if you could only operate at 30% capacity. Eventually they did everything they could. They took out the loans that the government was offering, but then they were required to sign personal guarantees. And then when March 2022 came and the restrictions finally ended, most of their customers had gone, and they were unsuccessful in getting most of them back. They had many of their customers have bought their own equipment or found other ways of providing their physical exercise rather than through that type of a gym. Uh, in October, they had to let all their staff go, which was 10 Canadians who then had to go on either welfare or UI. They were forced to default on their loans and faced bankruptcy with no prospect in the immediate future of opening up that business. And these are the types of stories. This is just on the economic side. There are hundreds and hundreds of these, but these are the type of people that are expected to testify at this hearing as to the impacts and to be asked at the end of the day what could have been done differently in order to avoid or mitigate these types of negative consequences. So I think that's enough from me. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to respond to them.